Tonight, we start with the failures of the country's top general. You'd be forgiven if you thought General Mark Milley's aim in senior leadership was to break his own army. His record in office, first as Army Chief of Staff and now as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is a dismal roll call of failures. He's never paid a price for them, but the Army has, and the country has. General Milley's record of achievements, such as they are, include episodes of profound blundering, a persistent misunderstanding of the national interest, and a dangerous willingness to politicize the Army of the United States. To list just a few, General Milley presided over the disastrous rollout of the Army Combat Fitness Test. The ACFT is a misguided, unrealistic, and expensive effort to essentially compel the entire Army to do CrossFit. The general ignored numerous voices within the Army warning against the new test. Those voices were vindicated, and today the ACFT is now a byword for leadership myopia. General Milley tried to stonewall the Army's own report on its performance in the Iraq War, running interference to keep the Army's mistakes from being aired in public. He relented only after public pressure that never should have been necessary. General Milley presided over a historic recruiting crisis, for the Army especially, but also for the armed forces at large. But he did bring back Second World War-style uniforms, which is a nice reminder of when our Army could win a major war. Speaking of winning, General Milley's record will likely include presiding over America's defeat in Afghanistan, culminating in the fall of Kabul to the Taliban and a series of massacres thereafter. While our national failures in Afghanistan extend across 2 decades, it's fair to note that his voice has been absent from the public square on this point. You'd expect a general to want to win. General Milley was a major force undermining the constitutional authority of the President of the United States during the insurrectionary summer of 2020. While American cities were literally on fire in the grip of a violent uprising with a body count and pervasive fear, Milley assumed for himself the role of preventing the president from using his lawful authority to bring peace and order to our communities. He made it his mission to deny the American people the lawful and constitutional aid of their own armed forces. It was Milley who apologized for appearing with the president following the now infamous clearance of Lafayette Square, despite the fact revealed earlier this month that the clearance was pre-planned and not the president's doing.
I should not have been there. My presence in that moment and in that environment created a perception of the military involved in domestic politics. As a commissioned, uniformed officer, it was a mistake that I have learned from, and I sincerely hope we all can learn from it.
General Milley also defended the slow, erratic, and uncertain National Guard response to the January 6th overrunning of the U.S. Capitol as super fast and sprint speed, earning the justified derision of the Speaker of the House and anyone who bothered to watch television at the time. But who are you going to believe, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs or your own lying eyes? That's the public record of General Mark Milley. In any organization but the federal government, any single one of these steps would have sent him out the door. Instead, like every other D.C. creature, the ladder leads only upwards so long as you stay in the good graces of the right people. Don't misunderstand me. Mark Milley isn't even slightly unusual in his sphere. Our armed forces remains a stronghold of brave patriots. But once you get that first star on, things change. Advancement becomes about subjective politics, not empirical outcomes. When your next job and your next promotion depend on a vote of the United States Senate, their priorities become your own, and you start to resemble a senator more and more and a general less and less. So look past Mark Milley for a moment. Look at the disaster of an Air Force spending billions on aircraft that still don't quite work. Look at the disaster of the Navy's accident-prone 7th Fleet, supposedly our first line of defense against an aggressive China. Look at the men and women responsible, all the generals, all the admirals. Mark Milley is one of them. The crisis of our armed forces is in the fact that he is ordinary.
There are over 50 books on my reading list to give our sailors, as well as looking inwardly and being honest with ourselves in areas that we need to improve.
I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. I'm putting China and Russia up there. That is not, however, in conflict with the acknowledgement that climate change or infrastructure or education systems, national security has a broad angle to it.
This is a group of leaders who are masters at political climbing, media engagement, and spending trillions in your taxpayer dollars. They even get the praise of one useful media idiot after another, whose natural inclination is to yes queen anyone who agrees with their woke ideology, no matter how obvious it is that they fail in any measure of success at their actual job. Keep in mind, these vaunted leaders haven't won a war since February 28, 1991. This story is as much about the failure of the United States military as an institution as it is about Milley the man. We get what the system gives us, and if we don't fight against it, it's what we deserve. In this case, a series of aging politicians who can't win wars. We used to recall our generals from retirement to serve during a time of war, but now they've become so political, they hang around until they are eventually pushed out, usually in a swirl of controversy and years past the mandatory retirement. There's little difference between the brands of these generals and any other major brand that has declined in recent years. Desperate to distract you from their own failure, they seize on something else, anything else, to turn criticism of their performance into an act that indicates racism, bigotry, guilt, or dishonor on the part of any critic. And that's how you end up with a person who is more focused on perceived domestic issues than on preparing the American armed forces to contain, to deter, and if necessary, to win a war with China. So when you look at General Mark Milley, USA, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, put on his show of indignation in the face of entirely justified civilian oversight, as he did a few days back, in response to sharp congressional questions on whether the military has gone woke, just know that it's all for show.
I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there.
So what if I told you, General Milley, that a flag officer of the United States Army addressed the 2020 graduates of the National Defense University with an affirmation that America is guilty of centuries of injustice toward African Americans, that America is afflicted with an original sin in Jamestown 401 years ago, and further, that our country features structural preferences, patterns of mistreatment, and unspoken and unconscious bias? Would you say that officer is woke, General Milley? Would you be offended at the term? Would you acknowledge that this officer, parroting the cant straight off the pages of the 1619 Project, is voicing the exact ideology your congressional questioners alleged? Of course, I don't have to ask you the hypothetical. Those words are yours. That officer is you. And this country and the brave men and women of every race, color, and creed who serve in her defense deserve better.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.